Welcome, the host here with PCCSU Posters and Podcasts. We'll be hosting this podcast, putting a new one out every month. Who is PCCSU? We're a Pitt County Coalition on Substance Use, and this podcast will be... My name is Jacob. I'm the host here with our co-host, Lillie Malpass. PCCSU has many initiatives, but our biggest one is supporting our community. So I look forward to seeing you here. Welcome, Eastern North Carolina. My name is Jacob, and we are here with PCCSU's first episode of our Posters and Podcast. I am one of two co-hosts, myself, Jacob Harding, and then we also have Lillie Malpass with me today. Lillie, you can say hey.
Hey, very excited to be
here. Nice. So Lillie is PCCSU's executive director, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with the structure of a nonprofits are community organizations. They could be on a federal level, state level, community level. And there's normally a board of directors who are community members who work within that space oftentimes. And then you will have someone who is an executive director who's going to assist and facilitate like the day-to-day operations of getting some of the programs facilitated in our community that we'd like to. And Lillie is an awesome executive director. So Lillie, I kind of wanted to take a moment to introduce Eastern North Carolina, to myself and to you. So I'm going to start with you. So why don't you give us a brief introduction of, who you are, how you ended up here, what got you interested in, addiction, substance use disorders, the education, and everything like that.
Okay, well, like you said, I'm Lillie Malpass, the new executive director for PCCSU. I really got involved with it. So my senior year of undergrad, so I did my undergrad in public health at ECU and then went on to get my master's and my MPH at ECU as well. Sorry about my cat. So how I got involved with PCCSU is your senior year in public health, you're looking for internships. So I was the PCCSU intern for the spring of 2018 for that semester and got involved working on all the great projects they were doing and the Dinner of Hope fundraiser. I worked with FASDs and all the great things that Ms. Montgomery and Dr. Matthews were doing with PCCSU and got to meet the board, all of those great members and work a little bit with our PCCSU youth team, which we can talk about a little bit later. And when I decided to go into my master's program, the board and the current executive director at that time, Elizabeth Montgomery, were like, we'd really like you to stay involved and help us out on some of our grants. So then I became the special projects coordinator, and that was really my first kind of introduction to more specific things with addiction and alcohol. My background's in public health, so I don't have a specific background to substances, but public health pretty much encompasses everything. So I did 2 years as the special projects coordinator, picked up the youth team there last year, so I've been working with them. Still have the youth team, still doing this year's Vidant Grant, which is the Posters and Podcasts, and in August stepped into the role as executive director, and I'm really, really excited about that. And over the past 2.5 years, I've fallen in love with PCCSU and what they're doing for the community, and got to meet all of the board members and have seen us grow and have seen my youth team babies grow over the past 2 years. And I'm just really, really excited for all the great things that we can do, and very thankful to be in this role and that the board is confident in what I'm doing, and I'm looking forward to it.
Nice. I like that you mentioned that you yourself, from a lived experience perspective, don't have experience with substances, like, nor was your major necessarily specific, to substance use disorder. And, this is a contested topic of conversation as far as having lived experience and kind of what space is it appropriate to have someone who doesn't have lived experience with a substance use disorder or a family member who may have been. And I've always held a position, that if we were to exclude people who don't have lived experience, then we're going to miss out on some really awesome people like in this field. Yeah, empathy just as a foundation doesn't necessarily require that you may have lived experience. It just requires that you have that compassion for whoever that person may be, and the ability to put yourself, for an instance, in their shoes to try and identify, some of the risk factors that may have pushed them in that direction, and then how to resolve it. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. That's just something that a view that I personally have myself. And then I guess going on to me, my name is Jacob. I'm from Eastern North Carolina. I go right now to East Carolina University. I'm the business development director for a company that puts ignition interlocks in vehicles. So I myself do not work in the field of substance use disorders or social work, even for that matter. But just because we don't work in something doesn't mean that we cannot be supportive or an advocate of that as well. And part of our nonprofit is having people from all sectors of the community, whether it be business, whether it be religion, medical, so that we can all come together to kind of try and tackle, this problem and create resources in our community, as we see fit, so we can get all these different ideas together. So now that we're kind of past the introductions and you've introduced us to our other co-host, your new kitten that you have there with you, I kind of want to introduce, Pitt County and Eastern North Carolina, to who is PCCSU. We do have some programs such as our youth team. But we're an advocacy and education organization who's made up of people who work in different fields, who do tons of advocacy work and tons of work in this industry, outside of what we may necessarily be doing for PCCSU. And it's almost a call to action to get other members of the community involved with PCCSU, because you don't have to work in social work. You don't have to be a clinician, to be supportive of some of these same causes. So Lillie, you may have a better idea of this, but PCCSU began in the 90s. Am I correct in that?
I think the idea was coming around in the 90s, and then 2002 is when Dr. Ames kind of put it all together and started it. And
so 2002.
Yes, 2002.
Okay.
We weren't originally the Pitt County Coalition on Substance Use. I can't remember what the original title was. I can look that up. But yeah, so that idea was there, and Dr. Ames was like, we're seeing rises in substances, and we don't just focus on alcohol. We do alcohol, opioids. We're getting into vaping right now and e-cigarettes, because that's big with youth right now. So that idea was coming along, and honestly, he was really at the forefront of all of this and really kind of predicted the opioid crisis, and saw all of that coming and had that in Pitt County, and we're trying to do some of that work because it's very, very important. Right now, our mission is to help adults utilize low risk choices. So we're never going to tell adults that they can't drink alcohol or anything like that, because as long as they're utilizing those low risk choices, then it is legal for them. We do help prevent underage drinking, so that is something that we're trying to get moved forward. We do alcohol purchase surveys with that. Our youth team is very vocal in preventing underage drinking, and we try to make connections with treatment services. So with our posters and podcasts that we're doing right now, and our podcast, hopefully we'll bring treatment services on here to get them interviewed. Trying to really build up our website, because PCCSU doesn't offer treatment services. We're education based. We just want people to know what's out there.
No, absolutely. And so kind of retracking here. But Dr. Ames, for anyone in the Pitt County area or Eastern North Carolina area who has never met Dr. Ames, I would implore you to at some point. He is a personal, hero of mine, and I'm not going to speak for him, but he truly is a great person. But yeah, so when you're talking about our mission statement, I feel like that fundamentally is, what PCCSU is, like what we are about. If we were to look at the spectrum of substance use disorders, we can tackle it from many fronts, and that's what PCCSU, would like to bring awareness to. We have prevention, which is a nuanced thing. It's not necessarily abstinence 100%. It is trying to postpone the age. Dr. Matthews, who has been on PCCSU's board and is still heavily involved with PCCSU at East Carolina University. She explained to me that it's, if we can postpone the age of first use to, I believe it was 21 or 25, the chances of someone developing like a medical substance use, like true clinical diagnosis, is drastically decreased. So it's not necessarily that we should be shaming anyone who uses or anything of that nature. It's just, how can we postpone that age of first use? An important topic that we'll have a whole nother podcast on another time is it would be like the legalization of marijuana that is happening now in this country. And many of the resources that I have read about it, even in support of it, advocates for it, would say that it's not a great idea for a youth or a minor to use it because the brain is developing during that time. Even in the medical industry, we're still learning so much about what the brain does, and it's so complex and just awesome stuff. But if we can remove some of these, substances that may impact that natural growth, of the brain while it's going through some of those changes. I am not an expert on this matter, but we will have someone at another time who could come on and explain it much better than me. But prevention kind of gets to the core of that. Can we prevent people from, ever using, that would be ideal. But if that doesn't happen, can we just postpone the age of that first use? Because it drastically reduces those chances of someone developing that diagnosis. And then, the next, I guess, linear step of the substance use disorder industry would be treatment. And then that's where we have, inpatient facilities. We have intensive outpatient facilities. We have medication assisted treatment. And, we'll have other podcasts that kind of go more in depth to these subjects. And that's really why PCCSA is here, is to provide the community with the education to know that these resources exist. Advocacy is a fundamental part of what we do, but we oftentimes find that the resources that have been created, if someone doesn't know they exist, then it's not really serving its purpose, and then that's what PCCSA would like to try and facilitate along with our advocacy. And then we also have harm reduction, which is going to be, somewhere in the middle of the two. If someone were to decide, to use substances, how can we facilitate them doing so in a way that is going to reduce, my voice cracked, reduce harm? Just from my experiences, like I've lost 9 people to substance use disorders. And if they would have had naloxone, Narcan, access to some of these things, they very well could still be here. You can't get to recovery if you're not alive. And we just recently brought someone onto our board of directors, Diane, which is one of the most important women in my life. And she'll be on another time to kind of talk about some of the programs that Pitt County currently has for that. And that's my idea of what PCCSA is. It's just bringing awareness, education, and then furthering the causes of these 3 different sectors of treatment for substance use disorders, and facilitating the lives of people who have been impacted by them, which isn't necessarily someone who has a substance use disorder. It could be the family member thereof. Anyone who's had a family member who suffers from this medical condition is very aware that it's a nuclear disease. Like, it may start, with one person, but it grows out, it impacts all of us. So what are some of the social deterrents that we can attack and remove? And then what are some other social programs that we can try and enact and advocate for it and see come to light? So I do like our mission statement, because I feel like it encompasses, that idea very well. So another question that I had, and you kind of went over, was how you got involved with PCCSA. I got involved with PCCSA because I saw the people who were on our board, and they're really awesome. And on later podcasts, I'd like to bring some of these people on. And I just knew I wanted to be around them. Eastern North Carolina it's not Raleigh, right? So when we think of Raleigh, we think of some of these legislative changes and some of these rock stars who are really bringing about some change. But Pitt County and then Eastern North Carolina as a whole, we have some serious rock stars here. Melissa Larson, who's on our board, she works for NC Harm Reduction. trying to facilitate some of these diversion programs, and I'll let her speak on that at a later time. Jar Michael Harris with ECU Collegiate Recovery. We have Diane, Dr. Ames, Carlton, just all these people. And I was just like, wow, I want to be around these people. Like, they're really making some serious changes, not just with PCCSU. And it's not just talking the talk, like in their lives, they are walking the walk to try and help people like, my friends, my community. And it was just important to me. And then I just reached out, which is, anyone who's listening to this, if you feel like you would like to see some changes come about in Eastern North Carolina as it relates to mental health, substance use disorders, things of that nature, comment on this. This will be put on our social media platforms, on our website. If you'd like us to talk about something, just write it in the comment. And then if you'd like to get involved, we have an email that's listed on our website, and we'll have it posted in this on our social media sites as well. But just reach out to us. There's plenty of ways that you can get involved. And whether it's with PCCSU directly or something that our board member does themselves, they could help facilitate that as well. Don't be afraid to reach out. So what is this podcast about? Well, we've already kind of hit on that a little bit. But primarily it's for me, and there's many different things, and PCCSU does many different things. So our podcast is going to take, a lot of different bends and turns. Me, myself, like, I really want to get education out there for things that someone could use today. Resources that apply today. Advocacy is a firm part of who I am as a person and how I identify myself. But advocacy in and of itself is for future change. Someone who needs help, like, they need help right now. Like, what can I do this very instance? And then once we get into the youth program, which, you'll explain in a second, as you see with a lot of youth who are at risk, they need something now. They can't wait a year from now for this law to change, for this funding to get released. They need something this very second. Our next podcast, we'll, have the DA of Pitt County on, and I'll be going over expungements. If anyone's ever had a criminal charge, if you have battled substance use disorder, employment is a huge risk for that. If you have a criminal record, it can make getting employment very hard, and it's a vicious cycle. So what are some things in place now where we could try and make it easier to gain that employment, where we could try and not let your past be the stigma surrounding you before you even step into that interview. And that's what I would like to see. We're also going to have professionals on here, for parents. I'll be talking about, some resources if you have currently, suffering with a substance use disorder, but, parents too, they're at the forefront of substance use disorder, just as are the victims of it. That they are the support system, and it's a very nuanced thing, knowing how to support someone. It's not easy. There is no right answer, but what we can do is bring on professionals who can try and help answer some of those questions that a parent may have. We'll have some government officials will be coming up here. We'll be having some medical professionals come up here just to try and educate our community on how to best support someone with a substance use disorder, how someone who has been impacted by it can use things in place to help get them further along in life. And then what are some changes that we would like to see made, and change is nuance in and of itself. So what are the reasons that we would like to see some of these changes made? And that's why we'll have some of these professionals come up here to try and explain that to us.
Yeah, and I just think it's so important what we're doing. And we came up with the idea, the board came up with the idea of doing podcasts even before the pandemic. And now with everything that's happened, I'm really glad that we're still able to find a way to reach the community, because we were doing town halls and we were getting out there and doing events, and with everything that's happened, we're trying to still reach the community, and this has been such a good way to do it, is what we're seeing with everybody doing. So hopefully it's going to work out with us, and we've got a lot planned, and I'm excited to bring all these good resources on and help parents have those conversations and talk with their kids, and just give them education as well, because I mean what we're seeing is, according to the last youth risk behavior survey in Pitt County, 20% of Pitt County high school students had already been drinking. And, research shows that quickest and easiest way to get alcohol is in their own fridge. And if we can remind parents to be mindful about some of those things, but also open some of those doors for those conversations that they may not even know that they need to be having already, I think that will be great and hopefully prevent underage drinking like we're trying. And yeah, I think it'll be good if we can get all these people on here and still make our goals and make our resources that we're trying to get out still reach those who really need them.
Absolutely. So, while we're kind of on the topic of underage drinking, I didn't know that statistic that you just told me. And Glenn Simpson, he works at Vidant, he's with behavioral health, and he has, often reminded me, of the dangers of alcohol, kind of being like the shadow killer. Whenever we speak of substances, for good reason, opioids are talked about a lot. I think I just saw a report from the CDC, like they're expecting 2019 to have been 81,000 overdose deaths. It's the highest recorded, and that's a projected value. It takes a long time to get all this data together, but that's a lot of people, and it's upfront and it's instant. But alcohol is something that it kind of snowballs. It can compound other ailments that we may already have, and it can sneak up on you when we're at a higher risk, like older in age. It can be really, really harmful. So I'd like to hear more about, the youth team, and you're kind of heading that. And I know you've had a lot of interest in it here lately, which is really exciting. So if you could just kind of break down, like, what is the youth team? What are some of the activities that they do? And like, what is the point of going to the schools and getting our youth involved? And what is the impact that has?
Right. So our youth team is comprised of local high school students, so 9th through 12th grade. So any of the high schools, the early college, all of those things that we have in Pitt County. So the idea behind bringing together a group of youth who don't drink and don't use any kind of substances or drugs is to do that peer education. Because what we're seeing is that even though me and you aren't even that old, the difference between a 15-year-old talking to their peers,
that's debatable,
and a 25, 26 people coming in there, we're still so much different than where they are already. So having that peer education coming in there and talking about, hey, there are ways to kind of cope that don't include alcohol, don't include drugs. There are ways to have fun that don't include that. And I know that is really, really hard because everything they're seeing in the media focuses on that, like looking at all of the high school students that they're seeing, on Riverdale or any of the CW shows, that the people who are playing those characters are our age. They're not even in high school, but I know on Riverdale, Veronica Lodge has a speakeasy. So it's like they're exposed to alcohol on their TV shows, and they're exposed to smoking and vaping, and they may not even see it as an issue because it's everywhere. So the idea that we can get peer education to come in there and be like, this isn't actually what's happening. And I mean, even at the college level, most people think that people are drinking and college students are drinking, but most college students don't even drink. You're just exposed to people talking about the ones that do. So if we can prevent them at that young age, because 67% of teens who drink before the age of 15 will go on to use illegal drugs. The average age that youth in North Carolina start drinking is 14. So really alarming statistics about how young that's starting. So we're trying to use the youth team to do that peer education. One of the things we're going to be starting is really trying to use the youth team to talk to parents and approach them about kind of what they're seeing in their schools and how to have those conversations and how to talk to youth from a youth standpoint. They recently did a PSA on the Good Samaritan law and being safe to call. So if you are in a situation where illegal drugs are being used or underage drinking is happening, you can call and get someone help if they are experiencing an overdose. So getting messaging out like that is very important, because we know that we're not going to become a society that is completely saying no to alcohol, right? Like youth is going to use, unfortunately. So if we're getting the messaging about, harm reduction out there of how we can prevent some of these really serious negative consequences from happening, then I mean, you got to start somewhere. So
That
right.
is crazy to me. I apologize.
Oh, yeah.
That the average age of first drinking is 14 in North Carolina, and I'm a father myself. My daughter is 9 years old. And I keep this picture. I don't know if you can really see it, but it's me and my daughter. It's at her 7th birthday. And to think 7 years to a 7-year-old is double your lifetime. But 17 years to me, I'm 28. Like I'm coming, it's like 10 years since I've been in high school. Like, time flies. 7 years is not that far apart. So to think that, 7 years from when that picture was taken, statistically would when she would take her first drink. And that just kind of boggles my mind. So I guess, yeah, approaching parents to kind of, let them know these things. And as you said, oftentimes the easiest way to obtain alcohol is just right there in your refrigerator. In drinking of alcohol, especially in TV and like you say, is super commonplace. And I think it's important to note that it's not inherently bad for an adult, someone who's over the age of 21, to drink, or hopefully over the age of 25. But as a youth doing it, like, it is a difference, right? Like, just because mom and dad do it, it's not the same as if I do it as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 14-year-old, 16-year-old, because we're still developing at that age. Like, there is a big difference. So it's not 100% harmless, I guess. Nor does it make someone a bad parent, like if they were to do it, but it's important for them to be aware of the unintended consequences that come with so many things in life. It's not just this one specific thing. We're all guilty of doing something that had an unintended consequence. But if we're not aware of the data behind it, then you really don't know. So that's why it's important to make sure we are getting out there. So I think it's a great program. Sorry, I interrupted you, but that boggles my mind.
Yeah, it's very important, and that goes back to what we're trying to do. I mean, me and you are very involved with PCCSU, and there's still alarming facts that take me by surprise. I'm like, wow, this is big, and with us being in the field, like, you think we know all of it. So with people and parents who aren't really involved, we've got to get that knowledge out there. But yeah, like you were saying, the youth team is a great program, and I'm really excited because we just had a huge recruitment cycle, and we're going from like 4 people who are coming regularly to, in our latest recruitment, we got, let's see, 41 applicants, and 28 of those interviewed, and we accepted all of those 28. So we have a very representative sample of all of the high schools. So that's
And
good.
how does that work?
Yeah.
What if someone were to miss that application, right? Like, what if it was, I guess we're talking high school, so it's like a fall and spring semester, but what if it were the middle of April or middle of March, and someone said, hey, like, I'd really like to get involved with PCCSU. Like, is that still okay? Like, what would they do?
Yeah, so all they would do is contact us. So in the past, we've kind of done, we recruit in May, and then starting the new school year is when we bring everybody new in, and that's kind of how our application process has gone. But now with everything with COVID and just getting off on schedule and just really trying to build the youth team, I'm just doing rolling applications. So if there are any parents who are listening to this of high school students, or high school students who are listening to this and want to get involved, just shoot us an email, and then we'll go through that process no matter what time of the year it is, because I would never want anybody who wants to be involved and is passionate about this to think that they can't just because they missed the application date or anything like that.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that the members of our youth team, they make a promise to remain alcohol and drug free. But the principle behind it is it's kind of like a peer navigator, peer support specialist that we would see in the adult community, but in the high school level. So if someone who was not remaining abstinent, right, but they were curious about the benefits. But I guess my question is like, so our youth team, that they serve as kind of like that point of contact, right? So they're not having to go to you or me or to their parents, where there's a power dynamic that's involved. They're going to a peer. So ideally that feeling of judgment is not going to be there, right? They have they friends, they have a peer there, and they have a social network. It's, if everyone in our social network is doing one thing, it can oftentimes make it hard to not do that same thing. As human beings, we oftentimes feel a need to be a part of a group. It's normal. It's normal to have friends. It's just providing an alternative to that. If you wanted to find a new social network, that's what our youth team's really providing. And the more and more that we learn about substance use disorders and what it does to the brain and how it works on a medical level, we have to be just as passionate about asking, why does someone do it in that first place? And I really feel like providing that alternative support system on the high school level is really important to that, and tackling some of the social issues that may come with substance disorders as well. All right, awesome. So I think we've about tackled everything that we wanted to today. So I did want to mention, as we're wrapping it up, that our next podcast that will be coming out will be with the DA of Pitt County, Councilman Ferris Dixon. I'm not sure if that's the correct term, I guess, or Mr. Dixon. I'll find out before I talk to him. But yeah, we'll be talking about some of the expungement laws that are in North Carolina. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, I'll be explaining more about it next week. So be sure to tune in then. And like I've said, this podcast will be posted on our social media, on our website. So give it a like, give us a follow. And then even if you may not be impacted by some of the things that we've talked about, or your children are not, still share it, because you don't know who in your network is. 1 in 5 Americans in some way is impacted by substance use disorders. I think it may be higher than that. And unfortunately, with COVID, as we've seen, some of the social issues that would otherwise have prevented someone from getting into it makes it hard, right? It's exacerbated an issue that was already there. So share it, because you don't know who may need to hear it. It's really important, whether we have lived experience with it or we don't, to acknowledge that it's there, and that we all have a duty to help our neighbors. And it really just comes down to just kind of letting our neighbors know about it. I'd like to thank you everyone for listening this far. If you've listened to me babble and the great Lillie here speak to us. So tune in, follow our social media, and we'll get the next podcast up as soon as we can. I'm really excited about it. And again, we'll be getting these podcasts out, as soon as we can, to get all this information out there to everyone. So tune in, and